Hi, welcome. My name is Dale McCluskey, and on this video, I want to take just a couple minutes to discuss the context of influence. Now, I discussed the difference between what's referred to as a correction or corrective influence and relational influence, and there is a difference. And so, when you think of a correction, usually you think of somebody, jerking hard on the leash and interrupting a certain state of mind, which is interpreted as bad behavior, something that is happening. Now, here, relationally, what makes the system different is that you're not waiting for the mind to build to that level. You're not waiting for that explosive moment when you're, bringing influence to bear to change the course of how a dog's thinking. Here in the system, you're tuned into what's really at work when it comes to creating change through how everything comes together with promoting change in and through the person. Now, so when you think of influence, think of it more as a nudge. Okay, that's the best way to describe it. There is an interruption, but it's very proactive. It's just as the mind separates, and to get tuned into what that represents, it's all about starting to think of the leash as a connection point, truly. And then beginning to get a better picture idea of how the picture changes. Like I talk about people getting a sense of being devalued or objectified. And what that means is that, and again, to look at defining, the kind of getting a foundation of as to even determining what's reasonable. Okay, talk about, how a dog's mind reacts within the, framework of reasonable leadership, and think about reasonable influence. Just like telling a child, what to do, but within the framework of even for influencing how they think with reasonable expectations. Well, here through nature and through defining leadership and influence with starting to bring influence online to change the direction of a dog's state of mind, or the direction they're going, and fulfilling that role. There is really a standard there. There's a you can define as reasonable influence. Now, any dog will bite somebody if it's unreasonable. And again, you can look at a correction like that too. If that's why people will get bit when they're interrupting for a elevated state, because you're getting a contrasting. A dog already has power. They're gaining a lot of fulfillment at that time. You may not necessarily see that what that possessive state is, but it is that. And then because how you can tell that is when you're trying to get the dog away from, say, an object, you're going to get a really high challenge state, because it's contrasting. It's the dog's already holding power in the relationship, and now they're expressing it. They're making really bad connections, and then you're trying to get the dog to disengage from that. And again, look at the issue of not even correction, just the reaction levels from what would be defined as reasonable influence. You're bringing reasonable influence online to try to move the dog away from that, or get the dog to drop whatever, and then you get bit. Okay, so this is the thing. It's not that it's the amount of influence is unreasonable, because it very well may be reasonable, but because of the power the dog's holding and what's being expressed at that time, how the dog's connecting that object, the dog is going to challenge that. So here it's understanding how to define influence, and how so when you're, for example, this is why within this framework of control, say using the leash, why the dog that's gaining power starts to respond very negatively, okay, challenge, and people call this reactivity. Well, the dog's reacting, okay, to the fact that you're trying to direct the dog's decision-making process when they have power already. And so, the level of influence, say through the leash, for example, is a tool, a connection tool between you and the dog, and that's what it is. It's a way to communicate. The dog starts to respond in a very negative way to that. Now, it'd be different. Again, think of it this way: the dog is leading the owner. Okay, the dog's out in front. That's why dogs that have power will start to, they won't want to be beside the owner within the heel position when the owner is thinking correctly. Okay, in the leadership mode, the dog starts to reject that, and so the dog wants to be out in front. That's why it's important not to allow the dog out in front when you're starting to, create relational change. The script is very important. You want to keep the dog in beside you as you're starting to, build on the relational changing script. And I define it. So again, understand it's about context, okay, and getting a standard, okay. This is important. This is why it's very difficult for a lot of people to really get that type of sense of what that is, because people are too emotionally invested. So, for example, if you see how dog's mind is responding and reacting, right away you think, you don't put it into right relationship or context with that reaction. Instead, it's like the weight of it goes over and your emotions get triggered. It's like, wow, the dog's being hurt, or why is that dog reacting to that? No, the amount of influence may be completely reasonable. Just the dog, what's happening in the relationship, because of the amount of power that dog is holding, that dog is reacting to that. Okay, just understand, this is why you have to put the reactions into context through, how it's defined, how a dog's decision-making process is governed through nature. So just, again, discussion about, it's important to get a real understanding about influence itself. How is it, to define it properly, and how it comes online to create change and changes how the person thinks. This is why when you see my method, it'll look kind of the same, but it really isn't. How influence is used. It's proactive. It's not reactive. You're not waiting. Okay, you're in tune to the dog's state of mind at the relational level. So this is why, when you're walking a dog and the state of mind is starting, you already know. I mean, this is the thing about knowing. You already know the dog's holding power. So you're communicating in a way that's going to promote change. Okay, it's not based on waiting for and then correcting the dog for a bad behavior that way. Waiting too long. Okay, and bad things happen. Okay, not to say that change won't happen through that, but what I show is there's a better way, okay, to make it less stressful on the dog and to get in tune truly to how a dog is connecting and the picture itself to build off creating a real picture of change. So influence is needed, just understand that, but I define it relationally. There's a difference, and then define it as to what's reasonable, okay, and understanding what that really means, and then reconciling that to the reactions of the dog's state of mind. Okay, the reactions could be very high, even, but because it's built on the person's personality type, and then the interplay of that, the dynamics about whether it's better to work with the owner doing it or with the trainer doing it, and understanding how that will contrast. Even, you look at how dog responds when it's, invested in certain, say, objects, and then you're trying to get the dog to disengage. It may not be a good idea. I mean, you need to start that process differently, to do it smart. Just understand there's a smart way to do this. So anyway, if you have any questions about understanding how these things all set up so that you can be successful. So number one, you don't get bit. The dog isn't going to be stressed out. You're going to be successful. And then at the same time, you're not going to be deceived. Okay, I talk about this problem with the picture itself, with response, with using certain things that are not helpful, like treats, and this issue of devaluation, getting a sense of that right out of the starting gate. You have to understand, it's very important that how influence comes online. It really is. That's why I stay away from this learning-based roadmap, getting in this thing about quadrants and all this stuff. Not helpful. I know this stuff at a really deep level. You have to understand it's really can be problematic for people. Like I said, and understand why some people can get away with that and the majority won't. Okay, that's a real tricky thing for people to figure out, because if you're not invested into really looking through the relationship at a certain way at the relational level, you can be deceived. Anyway, if you have any questions, contact me. I'll be more than happy to answer them.